Build creative confidence. Beat the inspiration addiction. Join the Writer's Gym. Gabrielle Kent began her career in the 1990s as a graphic artist building worlds for video games, before becoming a senior lecturer in games development for 16 years, during which time she finally had an idea for her first book. Now a full-time children's author, her work includes Alfie Bloom, a series about a boy who inherits a castle and a whole load of magical problems, Knights and Bikes, a series based on the video game of the same name, and the Rani Reports series, featuring a girl who wants to be an investigative journalist and her adventures with her rambunctious Mauritian nani. As a lifelong Discworld fan, she was overjoyed to recently collaborate with Rhianna Pratchett and Paul Kidby on Tiffany Aching's Guide to Being a Witch. She has just signed 5 books across 2 different series with a major publisher and is counting down the seconds until she can talk about them. She lives in the northeast of England with her husband, daughter and agoraphobic cat. It's so lovely to see you, and thank you for coming to see us at the Writer's Gym, Gabrielle Kent.
This is lovely. Thank you for having me along.
I met you through and on Discworld. In terms of your writing life, the games writing, the children's fiction is just such a wonderful... I'm so excited about so many. It's a toy store of using your voice and using your interests to make a career. It's just an absolutely several beautiful worlds. Was there a first love?
In terms of what I wanted to do?
In terms of areas of writing, or maybe it was subject or characters and don't care which medium in?
Right. So, I think the idea of writing was the very first thing I wanted to do. I think back at being about 7 years old, I was sitting down, making my own books out of paper and trying to think of good ideas for stories. I did that thing, where you always tear them up and think this is terrible when you read it a bit later, tear them up and never go back to it, which I've learned you never do, because you can always make something better. If you tear it up, you can never do anything with it. But so I always wanted to write, but I never really had that idea, that kind of one idea that, you knew could really be something. So I loved art as well. I went to university and I studied illustration. I loved video games, absolutely loved video games, but there were no real jobs for artists back in the 80s when I first started playing video games, because I got to grow up with them from the very start when programmers could do all the artwork themselves with pixels. But while I was at university studying illustration, the first PlayStation came out and art for games suddenly really ramped up, and I realised that actually there could be a career for me as an artist in video games. So I worked in the video games industry for a number of years, building worlds. So rather than writing for games, I was actually an artist on video games. And it's interesting, the parallels between writing, because in writing, I'm creating worlds through my words for readers to imagine in their heads. Whereas for video games, I was actually creating digital worlds for players to explore and experience. That was a really interesting experience to do that, to actually build worlds for people to actually go in and explore virtually. But I was actually visiting a friend who I'd worked with in games, who had moved down to Cardiff, and he took me along to Castle Coch, which is near Cardiff, and it's this magical little castle. So I'd love to live somewhere like this. And I thought, well, what if I inherited a castle like this? And I thought, that's an idea. So what if a young boy inherits a castle, discovers there's an ancient magic hidden below it that he's got to protect at all costs. And on that long drive back from Cardiff, I had this idea, which became my first book, my first series, the Alfie Bloom series, which turned into a 3-book series that kind of sold around the world. And that sort of then launched my career in writing. So it's quite a long answer to your question. My first love is... it's kind of gone through several iterations, so all of my loves kind of have tied together at some point.
And that sort of is the magic, isn't it? Because something that I do hear you come back to quite a bit is magic, but also is castles. That when, I forget which interview I read this in, but you have said a couple of times that what you do in your own time is visiting castles. And I remember at the British Library when I came to see you and Rhianna Pratchett doing your pre-launch event for Tiffany Aching's Guide to Being a Witch, I do remember that one of the things that you obviously have in common is that magic was very much part of the language you grew up in.
Yes, it was. I remember some of my favourite memories were mum and dad taking me to visit castles. And I live in the north of England. I've always lived in the northeast of England, and there's so many castles up here to explore. And it was just that sense of, history and magic. And there's so many stories around here. My dad is from Sunderland, and up near Sunderland, whenever we went up to visit family there, we'd pass Penshaw Hill, which is, I don't know if you know the story of the Lambton worm, the dragon that wrapped itself 3 times around the hill.
I don't know if Rhys told you, but I showed her one of my favourite influences was a book that I thought was called Joe's Book because it was my older cousin's book, but it's actually the Usborne Fairy Tales, and the Lambton worm figured very prominently in my psychology.
Yeah, it's just an incredible story, and it was just referred to as, that's where the Lambton worm wrapped itself 3 times around the hill. So it was just, I just assumed that actually happened, and all of these castles containing magic. It was quite amazing to have. My dad was so into kind of fantasy, and so he would talk about all these kind of magical tales when we were at places, and we would go to visit my grandmother in Ireland. So my mother's from Galway, and I'd have summers on the farm in Ireland, and my grandma had the most crazy magical stories as well. Castles.
You said she kept kisses, and I didn't understand sort of, was that a physical thing that when you kissed her, she showed you putting it in a jar, or how did that work? Because it was for little people, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. So in her kitchen, she'd had this dresser. Mum said that dresser was there from as long as she could remember. And she had a tin on top of the dresser. And whenever I gave her a kiss, she'd take it off her cheek and throw it up to the tin on top of this dresser. And she said that, that was, she would trade those kisses with the little people.
And this is something so important for writers because, although it wasn't witches, although it was Jewish stories, something that I felt such recognition is that there's different kinds of real. With liberal Judaism, it's not that we think this literally happens. And if it did, fine, absolutely fine. But it's not the point at all. The point is, what does it say to us about ourselves and how we live our lives? And I love the physicality of that, the kiss that was important that you had given her went there, and it all becomes part of the story, that we are part of the story.
It does, yeah. And it was just the thought that, something I gave my grandmother, this kiss became something that then kind of went on, and it was given. What did the little people do with it then when she traded that? But it's interesting what you're saying about religion as well, as sort of all of the stories. I think people tend to think that people from every religion believe all of these stories as actually having happened. But it's just a way of giving messages, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely, and not just religion, but then when we take the stories that, it is like family members, like my mother's dog who died a few years before I was born. I still feel like I knew him, Moses Joseph, via Jason Donovan or Philip Schofield. No different to that. You see, it all completely mixes, and I think that is important because listening to you, when I said about what was your first love, and the answer seems to be everything, which feels absolutely right, that drawing on our own ingredients is so important. And in my work in the Writers' Gym, which is the podcast and the membership platform, it is all about finding the habits that keep you doing it, that stop it going on some pedestal on the top shelf, and finding permission to draw from the well that is everything that's ever happened to you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the same for all writers and all creators. I think your first love is more kind of creativity, isn't it? Creativity in sort of thinking and art and writing, sort of however that creativity comes out. It's I don't know, that love of creating, isn't it, that we all have.
And in tuning into the love, and we'll talk more specifically about careers and the actual work, but in terms of what's worked for you, have there been times that the creative confidence hasn't been there? And are there any tools, rituals that have helped you get into the zone if you felt like you were not in the zone?
Yeah. Oh, it's the interesting question. I think we all feel that at times, and then you might get signed for a series that you may have only intended to be one book, and then you've got to create 3 books, and where are you going to draw those ideas from? And there's a sort of writer's block which does set in, but I know Terry Pratchett always said that writer's block doesn't exist. And I realised after a while what he meant by that. Because there were times where I'd get stuck and, things weren't happening. I didn't really have the inspiration. And I'd just go away and I'd take ages before I went back to something. And then I realised that, you just don't stop writing. You trust yourself as a future editor and you trust that passion will come back. You just keep writing. If you're a bit stuck in part, you leave yourself a note. My manuscripts now, when I wrote it first, everything had to be perfect. Every sentence had to be magical initially. I had to get it perfect before I could continue on. Now I just slap those words down. There may be parts that are beautiful and refined, but then there's other parts that are really rough. I'll get stuck and I'm not sure what's going to happen in this bit, and inspiration just hasn't hit. And I'll just leave myself a note in big red letters saying, put something magical here.
That relationship and trusting the future self to put something magical here.
Exactly. That your future editor, it's like, if you know you're a good writer, why aren't you trusting yourself in the future? Your future self knows what should go there. Just keep going and they'll fix everything for you, I think is...
I guess even, or maybe especially on days where we don't know we're a good writer, or anyone out there who doesn't know they're a good writer yet, or doesn't feel comfortable saying they're a good writer, that's even more important, isn't it? That your future self is going to know more about this book than you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's sort of having the faith in them to actually sort that out. And it's giving yourself permission to be bad while you're writing.
Yes.
Which,
yes.
Yeah.
I just hearing you say that, the perfectionism, which I used to draw on a circle, and I have given these as gifts to people in different colours. Perfectionism on one side, procrastination on the other.
Yes.
And that when we abandon perfect, we find something in us. I think I'd be interested to see if you have a similar sort of thought tool to this, because the one that I use at the Writer's Gym is the artist's palette, that no painter is going to go, I couldn't possibly mix that bit of orange with that bit of purple because my grandfather might not have liked it or have seen this canvas differently. And yet as writers, we don't feel as free with our memory, imagination, observation, questions about the world that make those colours. And I'm wondering, is there a sort of reminder that you give yourself like that if you do feel stuck? Does that happen? Or I
think I've become a lot more confident now. I used to have to just keep remind myself that this first draft is for me. It doesn't matter what I do. I can experiment. It doesn't matter what it looks like. This first one is for me. No one's going to see it. I'll tidy it up then before it goes to an editor. So, experiment. So I think, I'm not sure if this idea is going to work, but I'll just get it down there and keep going. And, again, at the end, when I look back, think, okay, yeah, that doesn't work. And I can either cut it out or refine it. Or there's times where I think, yeah, actually, that just needs a couple of little tweaks here and that's fine. So it's, your first draft is for you. Allow yourself to experiment. And that's what I keep telling myself. This is just for me. But also I find one thing I think new writers are very embarrassed about is actually showing anyone anything. And I can show people my work now. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect anymore for them to see it. And I think it's very embarrassing. It is like sharing your soul with someone when you show them your writing.
You did something with that I found quite terrifying to read, and I completely see why it was a good technique. But I read that you gave a manuscript to your husband, who you've co-written with lots of times. But he made a spreadsheet of. And you said, I wish I'd written this down, but it was when was it exciting? When was it action? And I read that thinking, good God, making a spreadsheet of when you were interested by somebody's work. And it's the person you love. And I found that absolutely terrifying. But at the same time, you were at a stage in your career where you were strong enough that worked. But oh my God.
Yeah, actually, I was quite early in my career with that. That was actually on my very first book,
right?
That I was trying to get published. So that was Alfie Bloom and the Secrets of Hexbridge Castle. And what was happening with that book was, so when you send a manuscript to a publisher, what you do initially, you send the first 3 chapters with a letter, and if they like the first 3 chapters, they'll then request the first manuscript. And that's happening a lot. People were reading the first 3 chapters, loving them and requesting the full manuscript, and then nothing after that. And I thought, what is happening with this book? So Satish offered to take a look. He created his spreadsheet. So he read through it. As he said, he kind of marked each chapter out of 10 as to, interest, action, and, what was really engaging, how engaged he was with each chapter.
And just to throw in some background detail, he's already working in games and fiction at this point, isn't he?
He's an animator, so he ran an animation studio, and he's now lecturing in animation and motion capture at Manchester Uni. So the only books he's written is he collaborated with me on the Rani Reports series. He'd never done any writing himself at that point, but he understands story and animation brilliantly. So yeah, and then he turned this spreadsheet into a graph, and you saw of action, excitement, engagement, and then it just dropped off after the first 3 chapters, and it just flatlined for chapter 4, because what I'd been doing was trying to get those first 3 chapters so perfect that a publisher would, absolutely want that manuscript. And then I shoved all the exposition and everything to shut it down the line. Yeah, that was all in chapter 4, which was when they all lost interest. So I turned that chapter into 1 paragraph and tagged it onto the next chapter. And the very next publisher, Scholastic, that saw the book, picked it up. So his terrifying spreadsheet of death absolutely launched my writing career.
That's wonderful and terrifying. And
it's brutal.
And was that when you realised you might want to co-write together, or was that not how that happened? Was that the opposite?
Yeah, Satish is great. Satish has always been brutal. And, having someone that can actually just give you straight feedback without needing to sugarcoat it is brilliant. It's so rare to find someone that can just give you the feedback without feeling like they've got to really over-compliment you with it. So it's brilliant. But yeah, I hadn't really thought of writing with him until, so Satish's parents are from Mauritius, which when I met him, I had to go and check a map of the world to see where Mauritius actually was. So it's a tiny island off the east coast of Madagascar. It's about 1 million people live in Mauritius. And it pointed out how few Asian characters there are in kids' books. And yeah, South Asian people make up, is it about 8%, possibly more? I think it's 9% of the UK population. And yet it's under 1% representation in children's books. They're by far the least represented minority. And so we were decided to have children. I was going through 4 rounds of IVF, and I thought, let's kind of take our minds off the IVF and maybe kind of work on a kid's book that we can actually read to our child with a Mauritian main character. And so we started to work on that. Satish, it took me ages to convince him that he deserved to be listed on the cover, because I do the bulk of the writing. What Satish does is he helps plot it out with me, comes up with kind of character's story, and then at the end he does his brutal editing and he'll kind of fix absolutely any problems with the story. So it's been a great collaboration. I could just get my head down, get it all down on paper, and then he fixes everything that's wrong with it. But yeah, it's funny that he didn't actually consider that made him worthy to be on the cover for quite a while when it's...
And this is something that comes up for a lot of people, I think, is that what can get called imposter syndrome, can get called a bunch of things, is what I find fascinating about that is the way creativity works and the way anxiety works is storytelling. And when we don't notice ourselves doing it, the plots are watertight. Know exactly what will happen if this happens, and then that will happen, and that will happen. And we forget it hasn't happened, and we convince ourselves we are not worthy of things, we're not capable of things. But it is still creative software, isn't it? I actually was on a massive tangent at one point away from magic, and I might just return to magic for a bit. When I'm a little unclear about whether you and Rhi met through Terry Pratchett, because I remember you telling me about the siding, because you and I had name stories in common, but I'm not quite sure of the chronology. Right. When did Tiffany and everybody else come into your life? I guess before Tiffany, actually, because she's one of the more recent ones.
Well, I'd been I've been a fan of Terry Pratchett since the beginning of secondary school, actually, when a friend lent me Light Fantastic, which I read before Colour of Magic, so it didn't make quite as much sense. But yeah, absolutely loved Terry Pratchett and the way he saw the world, and like how magic, contrasting with the very ordinary, was so wonderful in his books. The very first signing I saw Terry doing was up in Newcastle, which was for The Last Continent. So I went up to that signing. Should I tell the story of the name change? Yeah, I was in the last year of uni at that point, and I'd been considering changing my first name for quite a while. My first name was Carol at the time, and I'd never met anyone else called Carol who was my age. They were always about 20 years older, and it was Carol Kent. I didn't like the alliteration. And so I met Terry at this signing, and he went to sign Small Gods and Last Continent for me. And I was very gothy at the time. He said, "I suppose you've got some fantastic magical name." And I said, "Yeah, Carol." It's just, what wanker called you Carol? That's my dad standing next to him at the time. But he was admiring my armour rings and saying, "Oh, my daughter would absolutely love those." I was giving him directions to the shop and where to get them. But I met Rhianna quite separately from Terry. So I went to work in video games. I lectured at university in video games for 16 years as well. But it was in 2004, there was the very first games conference specifically aimed at women in video games. Because I worked in a studio with 65 men for 5 years. I'd never actually met another woman working in video games at the time. And I went down to this conference in Portsmouth, walked into a room that was full of women all working in games. And it was just like this breath of fresh air. And I was aware of Rhianna's work that she was writing for PC Zone at the time. So I met her there. So I felt, Rhianna Pratchett, I think she thought I was going to mention her dad, but I had no clue that the last name Pratchett was because she was actually Terry Pratchett's daughter. So yeah, I loved her stuff in PC Zone. She loved the fact I looked like evil Willow from Buffy, and we ended up becoming sort of great friends. So yeah, great friends for 20 years now, both working in video games. And it was just the opportunity to collaborate on a writing piece together came about just a couple of years ago to work on Tiffany Aching's Guide to Being a Witch. So it was my love of all things Pratchetty and my best mate and the video games that brought us together sort of resulted in this book that I was able. It was just an incredible experience to be able to go up to my shelf, and I've got all the books I've written, all of the Discworld collection, and to slide a book into the middle of those, which was my book, and in the Discworld collection was just mind-blowing for me.
That is just so glorious. And I think something that certainly to me comes across very strongly in Tiffany Aching's Guide to Being a Witch is the relationships between women, the witches, and the part that all these personalities play. And I think possibly something that the whole universe gave me is, I would say I personally, just thinking about the name story, I found it very helpful also to change my surname, because the person that brought me up and the surname of my father, it's different things. And I wanted to be the true self that I was. And when I changed it, that was enormously helpful. And that, having that in common and hearing you say something similar was flag wavy for me. I was very happy about that. But also the way that all of the witches in Discworld, they contribute something that another of those witches couldn't have contributed. There are things that Nanny Og can do that Granny Weatherwax absolutely would not have any interest or ability to do, and vice versa. And everybody's got their own part to play. And essentially, not that Granny Weatherwax would ever talk about self-actualization, and I can feel her glaring at me even now. But the fact that it is up to us to find the part that we can play, and the fact that your career has been very much that, the games writing, the children's writing, it was never, I think a lot of people, particularly when starting out, can sort of waste a lot of energy on who am I supposed to be, rather than the curiosity, who actually am I?
Yeah, absolutely. And my career has been quite experimental so far. I think you find a lot of writers will have like one genre that they focus on and one kind of age that they particularly focus on. And I find my books, they've kind of skipped about a bit. My first series was, quite sort of, magical realism, quite long, a bit more in the kind of the early Harry Potter-y kind of feel to it. And then my next series, which is the Knights and Bike series, was kind of younger and a lot more kind of like full-on comedy. The next series, Rani Reports, there's no magic in that. It's kind of complete sort of realism. A girl who wants to be a reporter and her Mauritian granny has come over, and that's kind of more realistic, small bits of comedy. And then Tiffany Aching's Guide to Being a Witch obviously is well into the Discworld. I'm actually working on a novel for adults at the moment as well, which again, kind of feminist dystopia sort of thing, which is really quite different again. And it's, let yourself experiment. Do you find that urge to become pigeonholed? You think, should I stick to this, what I'm known for, just because, I've got success in this area, I should really stick here. But I kind of like the fact that I haven't had like a major success in any area, because it's given me the freedom to experiment a bit more rather than feeling I've got to stick to this that I'm known for.
I'm going to argue about the lack of major success. Like, I know what you mean, and this is just glorious. And I remember at the British Library, do you remember about the gold and the invitation writing? I've got the word has completely left my head. I want to say embossed, but that's not the word. That Nani would approve of, and just the celebration of the fact that it was created by collaboration between you two on a world that you both, independently of being associated and related to, were celebrating so much. I mean, I think something that comes out of a lot of the coaching at the Writers' Gym is what we define as success. Yes, I totally see what you mean, but I want to flag wave that doing what you love and doing it well and doing so much of it, and if I may say so, surviving and choosing, but also in my head, surviving, collaborating with your partner and your best friend and making that work. My hat is off.
It's an interesting experience.
I am just impressed.
But it is interesting what you say about success. I guess I'm thinking what my parents might think of as success is having, the millions rolling in and your book posters around and kind of double page interviews in the Times and stuff like that.
See it, and the only thing I would argue back has, and I won't name names because that's not fair or necessary, but there have been times I've seen things, be those posters in the tube, and the person not come back with another one. That has happened. Whereas you are doing all of these and you keep doing them, and in terms of a writing life or an art life, to me that. And to have that, and also, you're a partner, you're a mother, you're a friend, you're many, 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 many things, and making that balance, I would say that's pretty magical.
It is. I mean, my career, so I worked as a university lecturer for 16 years, running like an international conference and everything as part of that. And I was very, very focused on that career and had a real name for myself in the kind of like games industry. I'd won various awards for stuff I'd done and the festivals I'd run. And
can we just have a moment for throwing away the sentence "I've won various awards" while not necessarily defining it as success? I really want the people listening out there who haven't won the awards yet to know that our personalities keep saying these things to us in our heads. I just want to throw that in.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think so when I was doing all that, I thought, I've got a name for myself, and it was really hard to step away from. So when I had my daughter, everything changed, sort of the way I kind of looked at life and the way I looked at that kind of career I'd had and the importance of various things. And I'd always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't have as much of a name in writing as I had in my other career, sort of lecturing in video games. And it's very hard. You kind of build your identity kind of pretty much around your work, I found. And so when Satish offered, I'd kind of supported Satish through his PhD. And he said, look, if you want to just make the writing full time. You know, do that. We can do that now. And it was really hard for me to sort of step away from being the main earner and the name I'd built for myself, you know, in my lecturing and games career into writing, where, you know, you people have heard me, but, you know, it wasn't as kind of well known. So I felt it was really interesting. I felt almost like I was losing myself a bit. And it took me a while to kind of reevaluate what success is, and then to actually settle into it and think that, yeah, the success here is that I'm doing what I love, I'm passionate about, and yeah. I can completely work that around my daughter as well. You know, I suddenly realised that I hadn't actually lost anything. I'd kind of gained everything from.
And the other thing that strikes me about that is all of those were things you chose, you did the work for, you made things happen. And if we're not careful, and I do see this a lot with people, that we can make the what does this say about me guilt or self-consciousness rather than what's the thing in the middle of all of that. What is the thing? What is the story I want to write? And being able to get to that curiosity through all of the self-doubt, I'd say that's the goal, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's the kind of self-doubt is, it's going to play you off.
Yeah, it doesn't go away when, you know, hot off the press, it doesn't go away when Penguin, for heaven's sake, have made you one of their most beautiful, you know, published items ever.
It's like having the remote control and being able to turn the volume down on it for a bit. And, you know, what's a lot harder than the first book is the second book you write is probably the worst, because that's the one where you've got the little demon sitting on your shoulder saying, never do it. The first one was a fluke, you know.
I think this is going to be so rewarding for people to hear, because it's not about, when I've done A, I will no longer feel B. Oh no, wait, I still feel it. When I've done Z, you know, but actually we carry it with us, don't we?
You do. That's one of the real things you don't. I think everyone thinks, you know, once I've got an agent, that's it. Once I've got that first publishing deal, that'll be it. It's like there's always going to be sort of something more that you could do that's going to make you feel like you're not succeeding. I mean, you might get signed for 3 books and then, right, but then there's nothing at the end of that. You're going to need to write something new. You might need to find another publisher. I've moved around different publishers, and yeah, it is like a constant thing. You've got to keep going. You've got to kind of push through that doubt. I mean, I know people that have been signed for 3 books, and you know, if the first 2 don't do as well as the publisher expects, the 3rd book might never happen. It just might not be published. Even if it's planned as a trilogy, it can end before that. You've got to be prepared for these setbacks and not think just because the one thing's happened, everything's going to fall into place. You just keep working and working. And I know people that's happened to. The 3rd in their series wasn't published. In fact, I know a few people it's happened to. Some people gave up. Others, they just kept going. They ended up, you know, with other contracts with other publishers. And then they ended up going back and self-publishing that 3rd book via Ingram Spark. It is Ingram Spark, isn't it, the name? They've gone back and kind of like self-published the 3rd book in that series. Or our friend Liz Flanagan, who's an absolutely brilliant writer, her series Dragon's Daughter was republished by UClan, which is a great new publisher, sort of based from the university. So they've kind of republished her original series. She's got a new series with them that's doing absolutely brilliantly, because she just kept going, kept pushing, and her new series, Wildsmith, has been doing absolutely brilliantly. And, you know, it's great to see people like that you don't let these hits knock you back. You just, keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah.
That would be the thing on the T-shirt.
It would.
Yeah. I have a few. I mean, say the thing is mine, where there's all of the fluff about how you know, but actually if you put on the page what you want to and you stay curious, it does happen. But I think that's definitely another T-shirt slogan.
Yes, exactly.
And answering as much or as little as is right for you, what's coming next? You said you were working on something at the moment, and I can
Yeah, I wondered how much I'm allowed to say about various things. There is something very exciting, very, very exciting. I mean, yeah, I don't know if I can actually say that.
That's okay, but let's talk about exciting. Let's just talk about the feeling for a second. Doing all of these things, keeping on doing them, rather than push for an exclusive, which you're not allowed to give me, what I am going to say is that must feel cool.
It does. It feels really cool. There's actually just a few things happening. So yeah, there's something that I cannot wait to talk about. I really, really cannot wait to
Will
talk
you come
about.
back to and talk about it to us when you're allowed?
Absolutely. Because it'll be a very, very interesting thing to talk about, I think. So that's going to be happening. Yeah, I probably can't even say when, but there is another thing happening. And again, I can't say too much because it hasn't been officially announced, but this is more me, so something I can talk about a bit more. But a series, a book that I wrote. Again, this is interesting to do success because a book that I wrote pre-COVID, so I probably finished it. Yeah, finished it early COVID start 2020 was. I finished it around then. My husband's the guy who's really
Spreadsheet guy.
Yes, loved it, said it's the best thing I'd ever written. And then COVID happened, and my agent said, look, this book has death as a main theme, even in a very positive way. She said, I think it's the wrong time to go out with it. And I really wanted to just get it out there. So I pushed my agent to go out with it. She was absolutely right. No one wanted a book with kind of death as a core theme during COVID. And so while editors absolutely adored it, no one kind of quite wanted to publish it around then. And that has now, so that's kind of sat there for a few years now. And that has now been picked up. It's come around again and it's been picked up by, I probably can't say too much,
but somebody that you're happy it's been picked up by.
Someone I am very, very happy it's being picked up by has picked it up, and it's going to be like start off as a 2-book series. In the process of a 2-book deal being signed on that.
And I think actually that's even more helpful for people than knowing what it is in a way, because just because things haven't happened yet, don't mean they're not going to. And we all need to hear that. We all need to hear that there's different times for things.
Yeah, I mean, the absolute kind of peaks and troughs for various things in publishing. A middle grade is kind of dipping a bit at the moment. Not as many publishers taking on things in middle grade. But things like vampires and stuff like that. Vampires have their peaks and troughs. They come back. Sometimes everyone wants vampires or everyone wants unicorns. And then no one wants any of those for a few years and then they're back.
But then they're back.
They are. It's axolotls. I'll give you a tip. Axolotls for young children are going to be the next big thing.
Excellent. Quite right too, and predicted by Vivian Stanshall, so happy with that.
Yeah.
Gabrielle, it's been just absolutely wonderful to talk to you. Is there anything writing or life that you'd like to just add to this or leave the people who might be on that journey to start?
Right. I think... Write for you, write because you love doing it, not because you're picturing this kind of star-studded success with money raining down on you, which I think some people write towards that. But if you're just focusing on that, I think you're never going to be happy as a writer. I think, write for you. But I think the most important thing as well is to, trusting your future self is the key thing I learned, and that just being able to put your words down and trusting yourself in the future to make that into something wonderful is definitely the most important lesson that I've learned in writing. So don't be afraid to be messy. Trust yourself.
Amen. All of that. Gabrielle Kent, thank you so much for joining the Writers' Gym.
Oh, thank you so much, Rachel. It's absolutely lovely to speak to you.
You've visited the Writers' Gym with author and coach Dr Rachel Knightley. Production and sound design are by Ashley Lexine, and theme music is by Chris Gregory. To join a Writers' Gym workout online or in London, as a guest or as a member, visit writersgym.com or email thewritersgym@rachelknightley.com.